How's it going, everybody? So we're going to go ahead and get into the new phase of the struggle against the bourgeoisie. This is the third part of the immediate task of the Soviet government. The new phase of the struggle against the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie in our country. This is written in 1918, by the way. I forgot to say that. The bourgeoisie in our country has been conquered, but it has not yet been uprooted. This is by Lenin, too. I'm not sure if I got to say that last time or right now. Sometimes I don't say who it's by. It's important. It's by Lenin. Lenin wrote this in 2018. So let's go ahead and get into it. The bourgeois in our country, not 2018, I'm sorry, 1918. Last thing I'm corrected. Okay, one more time. The bourgeoisie in our country has been conquered, but it has not yet been uprooted, not yet destroyed, and not even utterly broken. That is why we are faced with a new and higher form of struggle against the bourgeoisie, the transition from the very simple task of further expropriating the capitalist to the much more complicated and difficult task of creating conditions in which it will be impossible for the bourgeoisie to exist or for a new bourgeoisie to arise. Clearly, this task is immeasurably more significant than the previous one. And until it is fulfilled, there will be no socialism. If we measure our revolution by the scale of the West European revolutions, we shall find that at the present moment we are approximately at the level reached in 1793 and 1871. We can be legitimately proud of having risen to this level, and of having certainly, in one respect, advanced somewhat further, namely, we have decreed and introduced throughout Russia the highest type of state, Soviet power. Under no circumstances, however, can we rest content with what we have achieved, because we have only just started the transition to socialism. We have not yet done the decisive thing in this respect. The decisive thing is the organization of the strictest and countrywide accounting and control of production and distribution of goods. And yet, we have not yet introduced accounting and control in those enterprises and in those branches and fields of economy, which we have taken away from the bourgeoisie. And without this, there could be no thought of achieving the second and equally essential material condition for introducing socialism, namely, raising the productivity of labor on a national scale. That is why the present task could not be defined by the simple formula: continue the offensive against capital. Although we have certainly not finished off capital, and although it is certainly necessary to continue the offensive against this enemy of the working people, such a formula would be inexact, would not be concrete. Such a formula would be inexact, would not be concrete, would not take into account the peculiarity of the present situation in which, in order to go on advancing successfully in the future, we must suspend our offensive now. This can be explained by comparing our position in the war against capital with the position of a victorious army that has captured, say, a half or two-thirds of the enemy's territory and is compelled to halt in order to muster its forces, to replenish its supplies of munitions, repair and reinforce the lines of communication, build new storehouses, bring up new reserves, etc. To suspend the offensive of a victorious army under such conditions is necessary precisely in order to gain the rest of the enemy's territory, i.e., in order to achieve complete victory. Those who have failed to understand that the objective state of affairs at the present moment dictates to us precisely such a suspension of the offensive against capital have failed to understand anything at all about the present political situation. It goes without saying that we can speak of the suspension of the offensive against capital only in its quotation marks, i.e., only metaphorically. In ordinary war, a general order can be issued to stop the offensive. The advance can actually be stopped. In the war against capital, however, the advance cannot be stopped, and there can be no thought of our abandoning the future expropriation of capital, which are discussing in the shifting of the center of gravity of our economic and political work. Up to now, measures for the direct expropriation of the expropriators were in the forefront. Now, the organization of accounting and control in those enterprises in which the capitalists have already been expropriated and in all other enterprises advances to the forefront. If we decided to continue to expropriate capital at the same rate which we have been doing it up to now, we should certainly suffer defeat, because our work of organizing proletarian accounting and control has obviously to every thinking person, fallen behind the work of directly expropriating the expropriators. If we now concentrate all our efforts on the organization of accounting and control, we shall be able to solve this problem. We shall be able to make up for lost time we shall completely win our campaign against capital. But is not the admission that we must make up for the lost time tantamount to admission of some kind of an error? Not in the least. Take another military example. If it is possible to defeat and push back the enemy merely with detachments of light cavalry, it should be done. But if this can be done successfully only up to a certain point, then it is quite conceivable that when this point has been reached, it will be necessary to bring up heavy artillery. By admitting that it is now necessary to make up for lost time in bringing up heavy artillery, we do not admit that the successful cavalry attack was a mistake. Frequently, the lackeys of the bourgeoisie reproached us for having launched a, quote, Red Guard attack on capital. The reproach is absurd and is worthy only of the lackeys of the moneybags, because at one time the Red Guard attack on capital was absolutely dictated by circumstances. Firstly, at that time, capital put up military resistance through the medium of Kerensky and Krasnov, Savinkov, and Gotz. Gekechgori is putting up such resistance even now. Dutov and Bogaevsky. Military resistance cannot be broken except by military means. And the Red Guards fought in the noble and supreme historical cause of liberating the working and exploited people from the yoke of the exploiters. Secondly, we could not at that time put methods of administration in the forefront in place of methods of suppression, because the art of administration is not in it, but is acquired by experience. At that time, we lacked this experience. Now we have it. Thirdly, at that time, we could not yet have specialists in the various fields of knowledge and technology at our disposal, because those specialists were either fighting in the ranks of the Bogaevskys or were still able to put up systematic and stubborn passive resistance by way of sabotage. Now we have broken the sabotage. The Red Guard attack on capital was successful, was victorious, because we broke the capital's military resistance and its resistance by sabotage. Does that mean that a Red Guard attack on capital is always appropriate? Under all circumstances, that we have no other means of fighting capital? It would be childish to think so. We achieved victory with the aid of light cavalry, but we also have heavy artillery. We achieved victory by methods of suppression. We shall be able to achieve victory also by methods of administration. We must know how to change our methods of fighting the enemy to suit changes in the situation. We shall not for a moment renounce Red Guard suppression of the Savinkovs and the Gekechgoris and all other landowner and bourgeois counter-revolutionaries. We shall not be so foolish, however, as to put Red Guard methods in the forefront at a time when the period in which Red Guard attacks were necessary has, in the main, drawn to a close, and to a victorious close, and when the period of utilizing bourgeois specialists by the proletarian state power for the purpose of replowing the soil, in order to prevent the growth of any bourgeoisie whatever, is knocking at the door. This is a peculiar epoch, or rather stage of development, and in order to defeat capital completely, we must be able to adapt the forms of our struggle to the peculiar conditions of this stage. Without the guidance of experts in the various fields of knowledge, technology, and experience, the transition to socialism will be impossible, because socialism calls for a conscious mass advance to greater productivity of labor compared with capitalism, and on the basis achieved by capitalism. Socialism must achieve this advance in its own way, by its own methods, or put it more concretely, by Soviet methods, and by the specialists, because the whole social environment which made them specialists are, in the main, inevitably bourgeois. Had our proletariat, after capturing power, quickly solved the problem of accounting, control, and organization on a national scale, which was impossible owing to the war and Russia's backwardness, then we, after breaking the sabotage, would also have completely subordinated these bourgeois experts to ourselves by means of universal accounting and control. Owing to the considerable delay in introducing accounting and control generally, we, although we have managed to conquer sabotage, have not yet created the conditions which would place the bourgeois specialists at our disposal. The mass of saboteurs are going to work, but the best organizers and the top experts can be utilized by the state either in the old way, in the bourgeois way, i.e. for high salaries, or in the new way, in the proletarian way, i.e. creating the conditions of national accounting and control from below, which would inevitably and of itself subordinate the experts and enlist them for our work. Now, we have to resort to the old bourgeois method and to agree to pay a very high price for the services of the top bourgeois experts. All those who are familiar with the subject appreciate this, but not all ponder over the significance of this measure being adopted by the proletarian state. Clearly, this measure is a compromise, a departure from the principles of the Paris Commune and of every proletarian power, which call for the reduction of all salaries to the level of the wages of the average worker, which urge that careerism be fought not merely in words but in deeds. Moreover, it is clear that this measure not only implies the cessation, in a certain field and to a certain degree, of the offensive against capital, for capital is not a sum of money, but a definite social relation. It is also a step backward on the part of our socialist Soviet state power, which from the very outset proclaimed and pursued the policy of reducing high salaries to the level of the wages of the average worker. Of course, the lackeys of the bourgeoisie, particularly the small fry, such as the Mensheviks and the Novaya Zhizn people, and the right socialist revolutionaries, will giggle over our confession that we are taking a step backward. But we need not mind their giggling. We must study the specific features of the extremely difficult and new path to socialism, without concealing our mistakes and weaknesses, and try to be prompt in doing what has been left undone. To conceal from the people the fact that the enlistment of bourgeois experts by means of extremely high salaries is a retreat from the principles of the Paris Commune, would be sinking to the level of bourgeois politicians and deceiving the people. Frankly explaining how and why we took this step backward, and then publicly discussing what means are available for making up some lost time, means educating the people and learning from experience, learning together with the people how to build socialism. There is hardly a single victorious military campaign in history in which the victor did not commit certain mistakes, suffer partial reverses, temporarily yield something, and in some places retreat. The campaign which we have undertaken against capitalism is a million times more difficult than the most difficult military campaign, and it would be silly and disgraceful to give way to despondency because of a particular and partial retreat. We shall now discuss the question from the practical point of view. Let us assume that the Russian Soviet Republic requires 1,000 first-class scientists and experts in various fields of knowledge, technology, and practical experience to direct the labor of the people towards securing the speediest possible economic revival. Let us assume also that we shall have to pay these stars of the first magnitude, of course the majority of those who shout loudest about the corruption of the workers are themselves utterly corrupted by bourgeois morals. 25,000 rubles per annum each. Let us assume that this sum, 25 million rubles, will have to be doubled, assuming that we have to pay bonuses for particular successful and rapid fulfillment of the most important organizational and technical tasks, or even quadrupled, assuming that we have to enlist several hundred foreign specialists who are more demanding. The question is, with the annual expenditure of 50 or 100 million rubles by the Soviet Republic for the purpose of reorganizing the labor of the people on modern scientific and technological lines be excessive or too heavy? Of course not. The overwhelming majority of the class-conscious workers and peasants will approve of this expenditure because they know from practical experience that our backwardness causes us to lose thousands of millions in what we have not yet reached that degree of organization, accounting and control which would induce all the stars of the bourgeois intelligentsia to participate voluntarily in our work. It goes without saying that this question has another side to it. The corrupting influence of high salaries, both upon the Soviet authorities, especially since the revolutionary occurred so rapidly that it was impossible to prevent a certain number of adventurers and rogues from getting into positions of authority. And they, together with a number of inept or dishonest commissars, would not be averse to becoming star embezzlers of state funds, and support the mass of the workers is indisputable. Every thinking and honest worker and poor peasant, however, will agree with us, and will admit that we cannot immediately rid ourselves of the evil legacy of capitalism, and that we could liberate the Soviet Republic from the duty of paying an annual tribute of 50 million or 100 million rubles, a tribute for our own backwardness in organizing countrywide accounting and control from below. Only by organizing ourselves, by tightening up discipline in our own ranks, by purging our ranks of all those who are persevering the legacy of capitalism, who follow the traditions of capitalism, i.e., of idlers, parasites, and embezzlers of state funds, now all the land, all the factories, and all the railways are the state funds of the Soviet Republic. If the class-conscious advanced workers and poor peasants manage, with the aid of the Soviet institutions, to organize, become disciplined, pull themselves together, create powerful labor discipline in the course of 1 year, then in a year's time we shall throw off this tribute, which can be reduced even before that, in exact proportion to the successes we achieve in our workers' and peasants' labor discipline and organization. The sooner we ourselves, workers and peasants, learn the best labor discipline and the most modern technique of labor, using the bourgeois experts to teach us, the sooner we shall liberate ourselves from any tribute to these specialists. Our work of organizing countrywide accounting and control over production and distribution under the supervision of the proletariat has lagged very much behind our work of directly expropriating the expropriators. This proposition is of fundamental importance for understanding the specific features of the present situation and the task of the Soviet government that follow from it. The center of gravity of our struggle against the bourgeoisie is shifting to the organization of such accounting and control. Only with this as our starting point will it be possible to determine correctly the immediate task of economic and financial policy in the sphere of nationalization of the banks, monopolization of foreign trade, the state control of money circulation, the introduction of property and income tax satisfactory from the proletarian point of view, and the introduction of compulsory labor service. We have been lagging very far behind in introducing socialist reforms in these spheres, very, very important spheres. And this is because accounting and control are insufficiently organized in general. It goes without saying that this is one of the most difficult tasks, and in view of the ruin caused by the war, it can be fulfilled only over a long period of time. But we must not forget that it is precisely here that the bourgeoisie, and particularly the numerous petty and peasant bourgeoisie, are putting up the most serious fight, disrupting the control that is already being organized, disrupting the grain monopoly, for example, and gaining positions for profiteering and speculative trade. We have far from adequately carried out the things we have decreed, and the principal task of the moment is to concentrate all efforts on the businesslike practical realization of the principles of the reforms which have already become law, but not yet reality. In order to proceed with the nationalization of the banks and to go on steadfastly towards transforming the banks into nodal points of public accounting under socialism, we must first of all, and above all, achieve real success in increasing the number of branches of the People's Bank, in attracting deposits, and simplifying the paying in and withdrawal of deposits made by the public, in abolishing queues, in catching and shooting bribe takers and rogues, etc. At first, we must really carry out the simplest things, properly organize what is available, and then prepare for the more intricate things. Consolidate and improve the state monopolies in grain, leather, etc., which have already been introduced, and by doing so prepare for the state monopoly of foreign trade. Without this monopoly, we shall not be able to free ourselves from foreign capital by paying tribute. And the possibility of building up socialism depends entirely upon whether we shall be able, by paying a certain tribute to foreign capital during a certain transitional period, to safeguard our eternal economic independence. We are also lagging very far behind in regard to the collection of taxes generally, and of the property and income tax in particular. The imposing of indemnities upon the bourgeoisie, a measure which in principle is absolutely permissible and deserves proletarian approval, shows that in this respect we are still nearer to the methods of warfare to win Russia from the rich for the poor than to the methods of administration. In order to become stronger, however, and in order to be able to stand firmer on our feet, we must adopt the latter methods. We must substitute for indemnities imposed upon the bourgeoisie the constant and regular collection of a property and income tax, which will bring a greater return to the proletarian state, and which calls for better organization on our part, and better accounting and control. The fact that we are late in introducing compulsory labor service also shows that the work is coming to the fore at the present time is precisely in preparatory organizational work that, on the one hand, will finally consolidate our gains, and that, on the other, is necessary in order to prepare for the operation of surrounding capital and compelling it to surrender. We ought to begin introducing compulsory labor service immediately, but we must do so very gradually and circumspectly. testing every step by practical experience, and of course, taking the first step by introducing compulsory labor service for the rich. The introduction of work and consumers' budget books for every bourgeois, including every rural bourgeois, would be an important step towards completely surrounding the enemy, and towards the creation of a truly popular accounting and control of the production and distribution of goods. Okay. Well, yeah. Well, thank you for tuning in. This is Marxist Saw. That was to the new phase of the struggle against the bourgeoisie. This is from The Immediate Task of the Soviet Union, written by V.I. Lenin, written in March, April 1918. So thank y'all for tuning in. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Tumblr, Medium, all of these are Marxist Saw. Y'all can hit me up there. Y'all reach out to me. Y'all have a great day. And Dodada Goey.